She entered softly. First part. The morning fog hung thick over Naval Base Coronado as Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell adjusted her crisp Navy uniform one final time. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what this moment represented. After 15 years of distinguished service, countless deployments, and breaking through barriers that had seemed impossible just decades ago, she was about to walk into the most elite briefing room on the base. Sarah had started her naval career as a communications officer, working her way up through the ranks with determination that impressed even the most skeptical of her male colleagues. She had served on destroyers in the Persian Gulf, coordinated rescue operations during Hurricane Katrina, and earned her master's degree in strategic studies while deployed. Every promotion had been hard-fought, every assignment a proving ground. The call had come 3 days ago. Admiral Rebecca Torres, one of the highest-ranking women in the Navy, had personally requested Sarah for a classified assignment. The details were sparse, but the location told her everything she needed to know. Building 164 housed the Naval Special Warfare Command, home to the most elite fighting force in the military. As Sarah walked across the sun-baked concrete, she reflected on the journey that brought her here. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, she had dreamed of serving her country after watching her grandfather's stories about World War II. Her parents had supported her decision to join the Navy, even when neighbors whispered that military service was no place for their bright daughter who could have been a doctor or lawyer. The security checkpoint was more thorough than usual. 2 Marine guards examined her credentials with professional courtesy, their eyes showing the respect due to her rank. One of them, a young corporal, seemed surprised to see a female officer with such high clearance heading into the SEAL compound. "Ma'am, you'll want Building 164, Conference Room Alpha," the corporal said, pointing toward a nondescript concrete structure. "They're expecting you?" Sarah nodded and continued walking, her polished shoes clicking against the pavement. She had worked with special operations personnel before during joint exercises, and knew their reputation for excellence. What she didn't know was why they needed her expertise for whatever mission lay ahead. The building's interior was spartanly decorated, all business with gray walls lined with commendation plaques and unit photos. Sarah found Conference Room Alpha and paused outside the heavy wooden door. She could hear muffled voices from within, the kind of serious discussion that preceded dangerous operations. Taking a deep breath, Sarah raised her hand and knocked twice, firmly but respectfully. The voices inside stopped immediately. "Enter," came a gruff voice from within. Sarah turned the handle and stepped into the room. What she saw made her pause for just a fraction of a second. 12 Navy SEALs sat around a large oak conference table, their tan uniforms bearing the distinctive trident insignia that marked them as members of America's most elite fighting force. Maps, satellite photos, and classified documents covered the table's surface. At the head of the table sat Captain James Rodriguez, a legendary figure in the special operations community. His weathered face bore the marks of countless missions in hostile territory, and his intense gray eyes had seen more combat than most people could imagine. Rodriguez had led SEAL teams through some of the most dangerous operations of the past 2 decades, earning the respect of everyone who served under him. The moment Sarah entered, something remarkable happened. Without a word of command, all 12 SEALs rose to their feet in perfect unison, their chairs scraping against the floor in a synchronized movement that spoke of their unity and discipline. Their faces showed no surprise, no questioning of her presence, only professional acknowledgement of a superior officer. Captain Rodriguez stood as well, his movements deliberate and respectful. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the room was silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of helicopters conducting training exercises. Then Captain Rodriguez raised his right hand to his temple in a crisp military salute, his posture ramrod straight. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell," he said, his voice carrying the authority of his rank and the warmth of genuine respect. "Welcome to SEAL Team 6. The significance of the moment was not lost on Sarah. She was standing in a room where few women had ever set foot, being saluted by some of the most elite warriors in the world. But what struck her most was the complete absence of hesitation or resentment in their faces. These men, trained to be skeptical of everything, had accepted her presence without question. Sarah returned the salute sharply, her training taking over. "Captain Rodriguez, reporting as ordered, sir." "Please have a seat," Rodriguez said, gesturing to an empty chair at the table. "We have a lot to discuss." As Sarah took her place at the table, she noticed the documents spread before them. Satellite imagery of a compound in Eastern Europe, personnel files with heavy redactions, and what appeared to be building schematics filled her field of vision. Whatever operation they were planning, it was significant. "Gentlemen," Rodriguez addressed his team, "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell is here because this mission requires her unique expertise. She has specialized knowledge that could mean the difference between success and failure." Sarah looked around the table at the faces of these elite warriors. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, a veteran of over 30 combat deployments. Petty Officer First Class David Kim, an explosives expert who could defuse a bomb while under enemy fire. Petty Officer Second Class Antonio Rivera, a communications specialist who spoke 6 languages fluently. Each man had proven himself in the crucible of combat, and now they were looking to her for leadership in their area of expertise. "Ma'am," Chief Thompson spoke up, his Texas drawl evident despite his professional tone. "We've heard about your work coordinating the evacuation of civilians from Syria. That was some impressive strategic planning." Sarah nodded acknowledgement of the compliment. That operation had been one of her proudest achievements, coordinating with multiple international agencies to safely extract over 200 non-combatants from a war zone. It had required precise timing, clear communication, and the ability to adapt when plans inevitably changed. Captain Rodriguez opened a thick folder and pulled out a photograph. It showed a woman in her 40s with dark hair and intelligent eyes. "This is Dr. Elena Volkov, a Russian nuclear physicist who has been providing intelligence to the CIA for the past 2 years. 3 days ago, she missed her scheduled contact. We believe she's been compromised and is being held at a facility outside Minsk." The gravity of the situation became clear immediately. A compromised asset with knowledge of nuclear programs could not only cost the intelligence community a valuable source, but could also put countless lives at risk if her information fell into the wrong hands. "The facility is heavily guarded," Rodriguez continued, "but our intelligence suggests there's a window of opportunity. Dr. Volkov's handler believes she may still be alive, and if we move quickly, we can extract her before she's transferred to Moscow." Sarah studied the satellite imagery, her mind already processing the logistical challenges. The compound was located in a rural area, surrounded by forests, but with clear sight lines that would make approach difficult. Multiple buildings suggested a significant security presence, and the proximity to a military airfield indicated rapid response capabilities. "What's my role in this operation?" Sarah asked, though she was beginning to understand why her particular skills had been requested. "You speak fluent Russian," Rodriguez replied. "More importantly, you have experience coordinating complex extractions involving foreign nationals. Dr. Volkov is likely to be traumatized and may not trust American forces immediately. We need someone who can communicate with her effectively and ensure her cooperation during the extraction." The room fell silent as the weight of the mission settled over everyone present. This wasn't just another raid or reconnaissance mission. They were being asked to penetrate deep into hostile territory, locate and extract a high-value asset, and return safely while avoiding an international incident that could escalate tensions between major powers. Sarah looked around the table at these elite warriors who had accepted her as one of their own. She thought about the years of training, the sacrifices, and the moments of doubt that had brought her to this point. Everything in her career had been preparing her for missions like this one. "When do we deploy?" she asked, her voice steady and confident. Captain Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Wheels up at 300 hours. We have 18 hours to finalize our plan and prepare our gear." He looked around the table at his team. "Gentlemen and ma'am, this is what we've trained for. Let's bring Dr. Volkov home." As the briefing continued into the afternoon, Sarah felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. These men had welcomed her not because regulations required it, but because they trusted in her abilities and knew that success depended on every member of the team performing at their highest level. The barriers that had seemed so insurmountable throughout her career had dissolved in this room, replaced by the mutual respect that came from shared purpose and common dedication to mission success. She entered softly. Second part, the C-130. Hercules transport aircraft cut through the darkness over Eastern Europe, its engines providing a steady drone that had become background noise after 6 hours of flight. Sarah sat strapped into the uncomfortable nylon seating, reviewing the mission parameters one final time, while the SEAL team members around her performed their pre-insertion equipment checks with practiced efficiency. The past 18 hours had been a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah had been issued specialized gear, including body armor designed specifically for female operators, advanced communications equipment, and a compact sidearm that she hoped she wouldn't need to use. The weapons training had been intensive but brief, with Chief Thompson personally ensuring she could handle herself if the mission went sideways. 5 minutes out, announced the aircraft's loadmaster, his voice crackling through the internal communication system. Around her, the SEALs began their final preparations with the calm professionalism that marked truly elite units. There was no nervous chatter, no bravado, just quiet focus on the task ahead. Captain Rodriguez moved down the aircraft's cramped interior, checking each team member's gear one last time. When he reached Sarah, his inspection was thorough but respectful, ensuring her equipment was properly secured without any hint of condescension. "Remember," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the engine noise. "Once we're on the ground, you're not just an officer. You're part of this team. Trust your training, trust us, and we'll all go home together." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She had studied Dr. Volkov's file extensively, memorizing every detail that might help establish trust quickly. The physicist had grown up in St. Petersburg, earned her doctorate from Moscow University, and had begun passing information to the West after becoming disillusioned with her government's nuclear policies. She had a teenage daughter and elderly parents, both of whom were being monitored by Russian intelligence services. The aircraft banked sharply, beginning its descent toward the drop zone. Sarah felt her stomach lurch, not from the motion, but from the reality that in moments they would be deep in hostile territory with minimal support and maximum risk. If something went wrong, if they were captured or killed, the official response would be denial of their existence. 30 seconds, the loadmaster called out. The team stood as one, checking their gear connections and moving toward the aircraft's rear cargo door. Sarah found herself between Petty Officer Kim and Petty Officer Rivera, both of whom had been assigned as her immediate backup during the ground phase of the operation. The cargo door opened with a mechanical whine, revealing the black landscape below. Wind rushed through the aircraft's interior, carrying the cold bite of the Eastern European winter. Below them, snow-covered fields stretched to the horizon, broken only by patches of dark forest that would provide concealment for their approach. "Go, go, go!" Rodriguez commanded. One by one, the team members disappeared into the darkness, their parachutes deploying automatically as they fell away from the aircraft. Sarah stepped to the edge of the cargo door, her heart pounding as she looked down at the void below. 15 years of service had prepared her for many things, but jumping out of aircraft at night over enemy territory had not been part of her regular duties. Chief Thompson's voice crackled through her earpiece. "You've got this, ma'am. Just like we practiced. See you on the ground." Sarah stepped forward and dropped into the night sky. The parachute deployment was flawless, jerking her upright with a familiar tug that she had experienced during training. Below her, she could see the other team members' chutes, dark shadows against the lighter snow cover. The landing zone was a small clearing surrounded by pine forest, chosen for its concealment and proximity to the target facility. Sarah hit the ground harder than she had expected, rolling to absorb the impact as she had been taught. Within seconds, she was out of her parachute harness and gathering the silk material for concealment. Around her, the other team members were doing the same, moving with practiced efficiency to clear the landing zone. "Sound off," Rodriguez whispered through their encrypted communication system. Each team member reported in sequence, confirming their status and location. Sarah was relieved to hear her own voice remained steady as she reported, "Hammer 7, ready." The call sign felt strange on her lips, but it represented her full integration into the team structure. They moved through the forest in single file, Rodriguez leading with Thompson bringing up the rear. Sarah found herself in the middle of the formation, protected but trusted to maintain the pace and noise discipline that would keep them all alive. The snow crunched softly under their boots despite their efforts to move silently, but the wind through the trees helped mask any sound they made. After 2 hours of careful movement, they reached the observation point overlooking the target facility. Through night vision equipment, Sarah could see the compound clearly for the first time. 3 main buildings formed a triangular pattern around a central courtyard, with guard towers at each corner and roving patrols moving predictably between predetermined points. "There," Kim whispered, pointing toward the easternmost building. "Second floor. 3rd window from the left. Heat signature consistent with single occupant." Sarah adjusted her own night vision scope and focused on the indicated window. Through the thermal imaging, she could see the outline of a person sitting motionless in what appeared to be a small room. The posture suggested someone who was restrained or exhausted, possibly both. Rodriguez studied the patrol patterns for another 30 minutes before making his decision. "We've got a 15-minute window when the Eastern Patrol moves to check the motor pool. Kim and Rivera will create a distraction at the main gate. Thompson will take out the guard tower. Sarah and I will extract the package." The plan was elegant in its simplicity, relying on precise timing and the team's ability to coordinate without direct communication once the operation began. Sarah checked her equipment one final time, ensuring her medical kit was easily accessible in case Dr. Volkov was injured. At exactly 02:47 hours, the operation began. Kim and Rivera moved toward the main gate, their movements invisible to the naked eye, but carefully tracked through the team's communication system. Thompson ghosted toward the Eastern Guard Tower, his sniper rifle ready to eliminate the sentry if necessary. Rodriguez and Sarah approached the target building from the rear, using a drainage culvert to avoid the motion sensors around the perimeter. The building's rear entrance was secured with an electronic lock that yielded quickly to Rodriguez's specialized equipment. They slipped inside, finding themselves in a service corridor that matched the building schematics they had studied. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls, and Sarah could hear the distant hum of heating equipment. They climbed the service stairs to the 2nd floor, their movement silent despite the urgency they both felt. The hallway was empty, with numbered doors on both sides leading to what appeared to be holding cells or interrogation rooms. The 3rd door from the eastern end was slightly different from the others, with additional locking mechanisms that suggested high-value contents. Rodriguez worked on the locks while Sarah watched both ends of the hallway. Her heart was pounding, but her mind remained clear and focused. Everything depended on the next few minutes. The locks yielded with barely audible clicks, and Rodriguez pushed the door open slowly. Inside, Sarah could see a woman sitting on a narrow bed, her clothes rumpled and her hair disheveled, but her eyes alert and intelligent. Dr. Elena Volkov looked exactly like her photographs, though fear and exhaustion had added years to her appearance. Sarah stepped into the room and spoke softly in fluent Russian. "Dr. Volkov, I am Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, United States Navy. We are here to take you to safety." Dr. Volkov's eyes widened with a mixture of hope and disbelief. She started to speak, but Sarah held up a hand for silence while Rodriguez checked the hallway. "We must move quickly," Sarah continued in Russian. "Can you walk? Are you injured?" "I can walk," Dr. Volkov replied, her voice hoarse from days of interrogation. "But they have my research notes. Without them, the intelligence I can provide is limited." Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, his expression urgent. "We need to move, now." Sarah made a split-second decision that would affect the entire mission. "Where are the notes?" she asked Dr. Volkov. "The office downstairs. They were reviewing them when they brought me back to this room." Sarah looked at Rodriguez. Knowing that any deviation from the extraction plan increased their risk exponentially, but she also knew that recovering those research notes could provide intelligence worth far more than a single asset's debriefing. Rodriguez read her expression and nodded grimly. 2 minutes, then we're gone with or without the papers. They moved through the building like ghosts, Rodriguez leading while Sarah helped Dr. Volkov navigate the unfamiliar corridors. The physicist was weaker than she had initially appeared, stumbling slightly as they descended the service stairs. The office was located on the ground floor, behind a door marked with Cyrillic characters indicating administration. The lock was simpler than those upstairs, and Rodriguez had it open in seconds. Inside, Sarah could see a desk covered with documents and what appeared to be Dr. Volkov's research notebook lying open under a desk lamp. Sarah grabbed the notebook and several loose papers, stuffing them into a waterproof pouch while Rodriguez maintained security at the door. Dr. Volkov pointed to a filing cabinet where additional materials were stored, but Rodriguez shook his head. "Time's up. We go now." They exited the building through the same rear entrance they had used to enter, moving quickly across the open ground toward their rally point. Behind them, the facility remained quiet, showing no signs that their intrusion had been detected. The extraction proceeded flawlessly, with Thompson providing overwatch as they reached the forest edge and Kim and Rivera joining them after completing their diversionary mission. Dr. B. E. Volkov proved stronger than expected during the 2-mile movement to the extraction point, though Sarah could see the toll that captivity had taken on her physical condition. As they waited in the pre-dawn darkness for their extraction helicopter, Sarah reflected on how seamlessly she had integrated with the SEAL team. There had been no hesitation from any team member when she made the decision to recover the research notes. No questioning of her judgment when it meant extending their time in hostile territory. They had trusted her expertise and supported her decisions as they would any other team member. The helicopter appeared exactly on schedule, its rotors barely audible as it approached using terrain masking to avoid enemy radar. Within minutes, they were airborne and heading west, Dr. Volkov wrapped in a blanket and receiving medical attention from Kim, who proved surprisingly gentle despite his intimidating appearance. As Eastern Europe disappeared below them, Sarah realized that this mission had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. She had proven herself in the most demanding environment possible, earning the respect of warriors who respected only competence and courage. More importantly, she had discovered capabilities within herself that she had never known existed. She entered softly. Third part. The debriefing room at Ramstein Air Base in Germany was sterile and windowless, designed to contain the most sensitive intelligence discussions. Sarah sat across from Dr. Elena Volkov, who looked remarkably different after 12 hours of medical care, hot meals, and clean clothes. The fear and exhaustion that had marked her features during the extraction had been replaced by determination and gratitude. Captain Rodriguez occupied a chair at the head of the table, while representatives from the CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, and Naval Intelligence filled the remaining seats. The atmosphere was one of controlled excitement as the intelligence community began to understand the value of what they had recovered. "Dr. Volkov," Sarah began in Russian, her voice gentle but professional. "We need to understand what you were working on that made you so valuable to your captors." Dr. Volkov nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I was part of a research team developing new enrichment techniques for nuclear fuel. What my government didn't know is that I had been documenting safety violations and weapons applications that violated several international treaties." The revelation sent a ripple of interest around the room. Sarah translated for those who didn't speak Russian, watching as the intelligence officers exchanged meaningful glances. This was bigger than they had anticipated. "The research notes you recovered," Dr. Volkov continued, "contain detailed specifications for a new type of centrifuge that can produce weapons-grade uranium faster than anything currently in existence. But more importantly, they contain evidence of facilities that officially don't exist." Over the next 6 hours, Sarah facilitated one of the most significant intelligence debriefings of her career. Dr. Volkov's information revealed not just technical capabilities, but also locations, personnel, and timelines for weapons programs that could shift the global balance of power. The physicist answered every question with scientific precision, her trust in Sarah evident in the way she directed most of her responses through her, rather than the other intelligence officers present. The research notebook they had recovered proved to be a treasure trove of technical data, containing detailed diagrams, mathematical calculations, and facility layouts that would require months to fully analyze. But even in the initial review, it was clear that the intelligence would save years of collection efforts and provide warnings about capabilities that had been completely unknown to Western intelligence services. As the formal debriefing concluded, Dr. Volkov asked to speak with Sarah privately. When the room had cleared except for the two of them, the Russian scientist's composure finally cracked. "I have been betraying my country for 2 years," she said in Russian, tears flowing freely for the first time since her rescue. "I told myself it was for the good of humanity, to prevent my government from building weapons that could destroy cities. But sitting in that cell, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake." Sarah reached across the table and placed her hand over Dr. Volkov's. "You made the choice to protect innocent people. That's never a mistake. When you entered that room," Dr. Volkov continued, "speaking my language, treating me with respect rather than suspicion, I knew I had made the right decision. You risked your life for someone you had never met, someone whose choices had put her in danger." The conversation continued for another hour, with Sarah helping Dr. Volkov process the trauma of her capture and the reality of her future as a defector. The physicist would never be able to return to Russia, would likely never see her daughter again, but she would live free, and her information would help prevent the development of weapons that could kill millions. 3 days later, Sarah found herself back at Naval Base Coronado, sitting in the same briefing room where her adventure had begun. The SEAL team was assembled around the familiar oak table, but the atmosphere was celebratory rather than tense. The mission had been designated an unqualified success, with intelligence value exceeding all expectations. Admiral Torres had personally flown from Washington to conduct the post-mission briefing, her presence indicating the significance of what they had accomplished. The Admiral's reputation for demanding perfection was well known throughout the Navy, and her approval was not easily earned. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Torres began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had broken barriers throughout her own career, You have completed one of the most successful intelligence operations in recent memory. The information recovered will influence national security policy for years to come." She turned specifically to Sarah, her expression showing both professional approval and personal pride. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, your performance during this operation was exemplary. You demonstrated the kind of leadership and adaptability that the Navy needs in its senior officers." Captain Rodriguez spoke up from his position at the table. "Admiral, if I may, Lieutenant Commander Mitchell wasn't just along for the ride. Her decisions during the operation directly contributed to mission success. Without her judgment call to recover the research materials, we would have extracted Dr. Volkov, but missed the real intelligence prize." The other team members nodded their agreement, and Sarah felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the room temperature. These warriors, who judged people solely on their actions under pressure, had accepted her completely. Admiral Torres smiled, a rare expression that transformed her usually stern features. "Which brings me to my next announcement. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, you're being promoted to commander, effective immediately. More importantly, you're being assigned as the new liaison officer for Naval Special Warfare Command. Your job will be to coordinate between conventional naval forces and special operations units." The promotion was significant, but the assignment was revolutionary. Sarah would be the first woman to hold such a position, responsible for bridging the gap between two very different military cultures. It was an opportunity to shape how the Navy integrated its various capabilities, but it was also a chance to open doors for other women who wanted to serve in similar roles. As the formal briefing concluded and the team members began to disperse, Chief Thompson approached Sarah with a small wrapped package. "Ma'am," he said with his characteristic Texas drawl, "the boys and I wanted you to have something to remember this mission by." Sarah unwrapped the package to find a custom-made challenge coin bearing the seal trident on one side and her call sign Hammer 7 on the other. Around the edges were the names of all 12 team members who had accepted her as one of their own. "You earned this," Thompson continued, "not because of your rank or because regulations said you had to be there, but because you proved yourself when it mattered most." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as she looked around at these elite warriors who had become more than colleagues. They had become brothers in arms, united by shared danger and mutual respect that transcended any differences in background or experience. Captain Rodriguez was the last to leave, pausing at the door to speak with Sarah privately. "I've been leading SEAL teams for 15 years, he said quietly. "I've served with some of the finest warriors this country has ever produced. You belong in that company." As Sarah walked across the base toward her new office, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The scared young woman who had joined the Navy 15 years ago could never have imagined standing where she was today, wearing the uniform of a commander and carrying the respect of the most elite fighting force in the world. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Volkov, who was beginning her new life under protection in an undisclosed location. The message was simple but profound. "Thank you for seeing me as a human being when I had forgotten how to see myself that way." Sarah thought about all the barriers that still existed, all the young women who were still fighting to prove themselves in male-dominated fields. Her promotion and new assignment would attract attention, some positive and some negative. There would be people who questioned whether she had truly earned her position or whether it was simply the result of political correctness. But she also knew that her performance during the mission had created a new reality. She had demonstrated that competence and courage were not limited by gender, that the only qualifications that mattered in dangerous situations were skill, judgment, and the willingness to risk everything for mission success. Her new office was larger than any she had occupied before, with a window overlooking the training areas where future SEALs pushed themselves beyond normal human limits. On her desk was a stack of files representing upcoming missions that would require coordination between special operations and conventional forces. As Sarah settled into her new role, she thought about the moment when she had first entered that briefing room and seen 12 elite warriors stand at attention. That gesture had represented more than military courtesy. It had been recognition of her right to be there, acceptance of her capabilities, and acknowledgement that she belonged among America's finest. The soft knock on her office door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. A young female lieutenant entered, her posture showing the same mixture of nervousness and determination that Sarah remembered from her own early career. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Jessica Chen, your new aide. I wanted to report for duty." Sarah looked at the young officer and saw herself 15 years ago, full of potential but uncertain about what the future might hold. "Lieutenant Chen, welcome to Naval Special Warfare Command. I think you're going to find this assignment very interesting." As they began to discuss the responsibilities of the liaison office, Sarah realized that her journey had come full circle. She was no longer the one entering unknown territory and hoping to prove herself worthy. She was now in a position to open doors for others, to ensure that competence and courage would always be the only qualifications that mattered. The afternoon sun streamed through her office window, illuminating the challenge coin that sat prominently on her desk. Hammer 7 would always remind her of the moment when she had found her place among warriors, but it would also remind her that every barrier broken made it easier for those who would follow. Outside her window, a new class of SEAL candidates was beginning their training, pushing themselves beyond what they thought possible in pursuit of earning the right to wear the trident. Among them, Sarah noticed, were several women, their determination evident even from a distance. The future was full of possibilities, and for the first time in her career, Sarah felt certain that those possibilities included opportunities that had never existed before. She had entered softly, but she had stood firm when it mattered most. And in doing so, she had changed not just her own future, but the future of every woman who would follow in her footsteps.